Okay, so I need to tell you something about tomorrow, and honestly I think most people have absolutely no idea what's coming. March 8th isn't just another day. It's not just another planetary alignment that astrologers get excited about while everyone else scrolls past. This is one of those moments that I genuinely believe will be talked about for years as a turning point. Here's what's happening. Tomorrow at exactly 12:47 in the afternoon, Venus is going to meet Saturn at 0 degrees Aries. And if that sounds like technical jargon, stay with me, because what this actually means for your life is massive. These two planets haven't met at this exact degree in over 30 years. The last time this happened was 1996, and if you think back to what was going on in your life then or in the world, you'll start to understand the magnitude of what's unfolding right now. But here's what really gets my attention, and this is what I've been feeling building for weeks now. If you've been experiencing this strange combination of pressure and anticipation, like something huge is about to break through but you can't quite see what it is yet, there's a very specific reason for that. And I'm going to break down exactly what's happening and why the next 48 hours are so critical. Because here's the thing. This isn't just about Venus and Saturn meeting. It's about where they're meeting. 0 degrees Aries is what astrologers call the world axis. It's the very first degree of the entire zodiac. It's the spark point where everything begins. And when two of the most significant planets in astrology come together at this exact location, it's like the universe is pressing the reset button on your entire value system. Now, if you've been feeling tested lately, especially around love or money or your sense of self-worth, I really want you to stay with me on this one, because what's been happening to you isn't random. It's not bad luck. It's not the universe punishing you. I believe it's been preparation. And tomorrow is when that preparation pays off in ways you might not expect. The test you've been failing is actually the one you're about to pass. So let me explain something that completely changed how I understand this transit. For the past few weeks since Venus entered Aries on March 6th, she's been moving toward this meeting with Saturn. And during that time you might have noticed something really frustrating happening. Maybe you've been trying to start something new in your love life, but it keeps hitting walls. Maybe you've been working on a creative project or a business idea, and every time you think you're making progress, something blocks you. Maybe you've been trying to value yourself more, set better boundaries, ask for what you're worth, but it feels like the universe keeps testing whether you really mean it. That's Saturn. That's what Saturn does. Saturn is the cosmic teacher, the planet of tests and trials and long-term consequences. And when Venus, the planet of love, beauty, pleasure, and value, tries to move through Saturn's territory, Saturn doesn't just let her pass. Saturn makes her prove she's serious. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to get into an exclusive club. Venus is standing at the door saying, "I deserve to be here, I'm worthy of this." And Saturn is the bouncer with his arms crossed asking, "Okay, but can you prove it? Can you show me you've done the work? Can you demonstrate that you're not just talking about your worth but actually embodying it?" And here's what I've realized, and this was a huge aha moment for me. Most people fail this test not because they're not worthy, but because they give up right before they pass. They hit the resistance and they think it means no. They interpret the obstacle as rejection when it's actually the final exam. Does that resonate? Have you been feeling like every time you try to step into something better, something blocks you? That's not the universe saying you can't have it. That's Saturn saying, "Prove to me you're ready for it." And tomorrow, when Venus finally meets Saturn at that 0 degree Aries point, I believe something shifts. The test becomes the blessing. The obstacle becomes the breakthrough. The resistance that's been pushing against you suddenly becomes the foundation that supports you. But here's the catch, and this is really important. You have to have done the work. You have to have stayed in the game. You have to have kept showing up even when it felt like nothing was moving. Because Saturn doesn't reward potential. Saturn rewards effort. Saturn rewards consistency. Saturn rewards the people who prove through their actions, not just their words, that they're serious about what they want. This is why the past few weeks have felt so intense. This is why you might have been questioning everything. This is why relationships that look perfect on paper suddenly revealed their cracks. This is why financial situations that seemed stable suddenly demanded your attention. Saturn was stressed testing everything to see what's real and what's not. And tomorrow is the results. Tomorrow is when you find out what survived the test. And I really believe for those who've been doing the work, the results are going to be shocking in the best possible way. Why is 0 degrees Aries changes everything? Now I need to explain something about this specific degree, because it's not just that Venus and Saturn are meeting. It's where they're meeting that makes this so powerful. 0 degrees Aries is called the Aries point or the world axis. And in astrology, this degree has a reputation for bringing things into public visibility, for making the personal suddenly universal, for taking what's been private and internal and bringing it out into the world in a way that can't be ignored. When planets meet at 0 Aries, they don't whisper. They announce. They declare. They make a statement. And when it's Venus and Saturn making that statement together, the message is this: your worth is no longer negotiable. Your standards are no longer flexible. What you've been building in private is about to become undeniable in public. I've been thinking about this a lot because Aries is the sign of the warrior, the pioneer, the person who goes first. It's the energy of I am. It's pure self-assertion. It's the courage to exist without apology. And when Venus, the planet of relationships and values, enters Aries, she's asking, what do I want? Not what does everyone else want from me? Not what's safe or comfortable or expected. What do I actually want? But Venus in Aries can be impulsive. She can be reckless. She can mistake desire for destiny. She can confuse excitement with sustainability. And that's where Saturn comes in. Saturn at 0 Aries is saying, yes, you get to want what you want. Yes, you get to assert yourself. Yes, you get to be bold and brave and unapologetic. But you also have to be responsible. You also have to think long-term. You also have to build something that lasts. This is the marriage of passion and discipline. This is the union of desire and responsibility. This is what happens when the lover meets the architect and they agree to build something together. And I really believe that's what's available tomorrow for people who are ready to receive it. But here's what makes this even more intense. This conjunction is happening just days after Saturn entered Aries on February 13th. So Saturn is brand new in this sign. He's just crossed the threshold. He's just begun his 3-year journey through Aries. And Venus is the first personal planet to meet him there. She's the scout. She's the one testing the waters. She's the one finding out what the new rules are. And what I think is happening is this. Venus is negotiating on behalf of all of us. She's asking Saturn, okay, what are the new standards? What are the new requirements? What do we have to prove now in order to receive love, abundance, beauty, pleasure? And Saturn is answering. And that answer is being delivered tomorrow. The answer is this. You have to be willing to stand alone first. You have to be willing to validate yourself before anyone else validates you. You have to be willing to set the standard and hold it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people push back, even when it would be easier to lower it. Because here's what Saturn in Aries is teaching us over the next 3 years. Your worth isn't determined by consensus. Your value isn't up for debate. Your right to exist and assert yourself and take up space doesn't require anyone else's permission. But it does require your own conviction. It does require you to back yourself even when no one else does. It does require you to be your own authority. And tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn at that 0 degree, that's the initiation. That's the moment you either step into that level of self-possession or you don't. That's the moment you either claim your worth or you keep waiting for someone else to give it to you. The 3 signs that will feel this most powerfully. Now I know some of you are wondering, okay, but how does this affect me specifically? And while everyone is going to feel this energy to some degree, there are 3 zodiac signs that are standing directly in the line of fire. 3 signs where this conjunction isn't just background noise but a life-changing turning point. If you're an Aries sun, moon or rising, this is your moment. This conjunction is happening in your first house of self-identity and physical presence. This is about you. This is about how you see yourself, how you present yourself to the world, how you claim space in your own life. For the past few weeks since Saturn entered your sign, you've probably been feeling this intense pressure to grow up, to step up, to become the most mature version of yourself. And it hasn't been comfortable. Saturn in your first house can feel heavy. It can make you hyper-aware of your limitations, your responsibilities, the gap between who you are and who you need to become. But tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn in your sign, something beautiful happens. The pressure becomes purpose. The weight becomes worth. You realize that the standards you've been holding yourself to, the discipline you've been applying, the work you've been doing, it's all been building toward this moment where you finally see yourself clearly. Where you finally recognize your own value, not because someone else told you, but because you've proven it to yourself. And here's what I think happens for Aries. You're going to have a moment probably in the next 48 hours where you look in the mirror and you don't see the person you used to be anymore. You see someone stronger, someone more grounded, someone who's earned their confidence through actual effort, not just bravado. And that recognition, that's the blessing. That's what you've been working toward. If you're a Libra Sun, Moon or Rising, this conjunction is hitting your 7th house of committed partnerships and one-on-one relationships. And I need to be really honest with you about what this means, because Libra, this is your reckoning moment. For years you've been the peacekeeper, the diplomat, the one who bends and adjusts and compromises to keep everyone happy. You've made yourself smaller to make others comfortable. You've swallowed your needs to avoid conflict. You've prioritized harmony over honesty. And Saturn meeting Venus in your relationship house is saying that era is over, done, finished. You can't keep operating that way anymore because it's not sustainable. It's not real partnership. It's not love. It's codependency dressed up as consideration. What I think is going to happen for Libra in the next 48 hours is this. You're going to have a conversation or a realization that forces you to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your integrity. Between maintaining the relationship as it is and demanding that it evolve into something real. And here's the hard part. You might lose people. You might have to walk away from connections that look beautiful on the surface but were hollow underneath. But here's what you gain. You gain yourself back. You gain the ability to be in relationships where you don't have to perform or pretend or sacrifice your truth. You gain partnerships built on mutual respect instead of one-sided accommodation. And I really believe that's worth more than any relationship you have to shrink yourself to maintain. And if you're a Capricorn Sun, Moon or Rising, this conjunction is activating your 4th house of home, family, roots and emotional foundation. This is deep work. This is ancestral work. This is about the patterns you inherited, the beliefs about worth and value that were passed down to you before you even had language to question them. Saturn is your ruling planet, so you feel Saturn transits more intensely than most people. And when Saturn meets Venus in your home sector, it's asking you to examine the foundation your entire life is built on. What did you learn about love from your family? What did you absorb about money, about security, about what you deserve? And more importantly, are those beliefs actually yours, or are they just inherited programming that you've never questioned? I think what's happening for Capricorn right now is a complete renovation of your emotional infrastructure. You're not just rearranging furniture. You're tearing down walls. You're examining the foundation. You're asking whether the structure you've been living in can actually support the life you want to build. And tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn in that space, you might have a breakthrough about why certain patterns keep repeating in your relationships. Why you keep attracting the same type of person. Why you keep ending up in situations where you're giving more than you're receiving. And the answer is going to trace back to something you learned very early about what you're worth and what you're allowed to ask for. But here's the beautiful part. Once you see it, once you understand where it came from, you can choose differently. You can decide that just because something was modeled for you doesn't mean you have to repeat it. You can become the one who breaks the cycle. And I really believe that's what this conjunction is offering you. The chance to be the ancestor your future self will thank. The shocking breakthrough nobody's talking about. Now here's something I've been noticing that I think is really important, and honestly I haven't seen anyone else talking about this. This Venus-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aries is happening exactly 2 weeks after the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that occurred on February 20th at the same degree. 0 degrees Aries. Think about what that means. Saturn and Neptune met at the beginning of Aries and dissolved all the old structures, all the old dreams, all the illusions about what was possible. They created this massive fog, this confusion, this sense that nothing was solid anymore. And a lot of people are still in that fog. They're still trying to figure out what's real and what's not. They're still processing the loss of certainty. But tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn at that exact same degree, it's like the fog is lifting. It's like someone turned on the lights. And what you're going to see is this. The dreams that dissolved weren't meant for you. The structures that fell apart weren't strong enough to support where you're going. The relationships that ended weren't aligned with your actual worth. And I think the shocking breakthrough that's coming for a lot of people tomorrow is the realization that what felt like loss was actually protection. What felt like failure was actually redirection. What felt like the universe taking things away was actually the universe clearing space for something better. Because here's what Venus brings that Saturn and Neptune didn't. Venus brings value. Venus brings beauty. Venus brings the ability to see what's worth keeping and what's worth building. Saturn and Neptune together can be nihilistic. They can make you feel like nothing matters, like everything is meaningless, like there's no point in trying. But Venus says no, some things do matter. Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth the discipline and the effort and the long-term commitment. And when Venus meets Saturn tomorrow, she's asking you to identify what those things are for you. What's worth your devotion? What's worth your discipline? What's worth building slowly and carefully over time, even when it's hard, even when you don't see immediate results? And I think for a lot of people the answer is going to surprise them. Because it's not going to be what they thought it would be. It's not going to be what they've been chasing. It's going to be something deeper. Something more real. Something that's been there all along, but they couldn't see it because they were too busy chasing illusions. The practical magic of this moment. Okay, so let me get really practical with you, because I think one of the mistakes people make with these big transits is they treat them like they're purely symbolic or spiritual or abstract. And yes, there's a spiritual dimension to this. But there's also a very practical material dimension. And I want to talk about that. Venus rules money. Venus rules resources. Venus rules what you value and what you're willing to exchange your time and energy for. And when Venus meets Saturn, the planet of structure and long-term planning at the beginning of Aries, the sign of initiation and new beginning, something very specific happens in the material world. Opportunities that have been blocked suddenly open. Deals that have been stalled suddenly move forward. Money that's been owed to you suddenly shows up. Not because of magic. Not because you manifested it with positive thinking. But because you've been doing the work. Because you've been consistent. Because you've proven through your actions that you're serious. I've been watching this play out in my own life and in the lives of people I know. There's this pattern where right before a Venus-Saturn conjunction, people hit what feels like a wall. A financial setback. A business deal that falls through. A client who disappears. A project that gets rejected. And it feels like failure. It feels like you're moving backward. But what's actually happening is Saturn is testing your commitment. Saturn is asking, are you going to keep going even when you don't see immediate results? Are you going to maintain your standards even when it would be easier to lower them? Are you going to keep showing up even when no one's watching? And the people who pass that test, the people who keep going anyway, those are the people who experience the breakthrough tomorrow. Those are the people who suddenly get the yes after months of NOS. Those are the people who suddenly see the return on investment they've been working toward. But here's the key, and this is what I really want you to understand. The breakthrough doesn't come because you finally figured out the right strategy or the right technique or the right manifestation ritual. The breakthrough comes because you became the kind of person who's ready to receive it. You developed the discipline. You proved the consistency. You demonstrated through your actions, not just your intentions, that you're serious about what you want. And that's what Saturn rewards. Saturn doesn't care about your vision board. Saturn doesn't care about your affirmations. Saturn cares about what you do when no one's looking. Saturn cares about whether you show up on the days when you don't feel like it. Saturn cares about whether you maintain your standards even when it's inconvenient. And tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn at 0 Aries, I believe there's going to be this moment of recognition. This moment where you look at your life and you realize, oh, the work I've been doing, the discipline I've been applying, the standards I've been holding, it wasn't for nothing. It was building toward this. The relationship reset you didn't see coming. Now I want to talk about something that I think is going to catch a lot of people off guard. This Venus-Saturn conjunction is going to reset relationships in ways that feel sudden but have actually been building for a while. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about all relationships, friendships, business partnerships, family dynamics. Here's what I've been noticing. When Venus meets Saturn, especially at a critical degree, like zero Aries, relationships that have been operating on outdated agreements suddenly can't function anymore. The old rules don't work. The old patterns don't hold. And both people feel it at the same time. Maybe you've been in a friendship where you're always the one reaching out. Always the one making plans. Always the one putting in effort. And you've accepted that dynamic because that's just how it's always been. But tomorrow something shifts. You realize you don't want to do that anymore. You realize that's not actually friendship. That's you performing friendship while the other person spectates. Or maybe you've been in a romantic relationship where you've been accepting breadcrumbs, inconsistent communication, vague commitments, excuses instead of effort, and you've been telling yourself it's fine. You've been telling yourself they're just busy, or they're going through something, or they'll change eventually. But tomorrow you wake up and you realize you're done. You're done accepting less than you deserve. You're done making excuses for someone else's lack of effort. And here's what's wild about this. It's not that you suddenly become angry or bitter or resentful. It's that you suddenly become clear, crystal clear, about what's real and what's not. About who's actually showing up and who's just taking up space. About what's worth your energy and what's draining it. And that clarity is the gift. That clarity is what allows you to make different choices, to set different boundaries, to create different standards. Not from a place of punishment or revenge, but from a place of self-respect. I think what's going to happen for a lot of people in the next 48 hours is they're going to have conversations they've been avoiding. They're going to say things they've been holding back. They're going to ask for what they need instead of hoping someone will intuitively figure it out. And some relationships are going to rise to meet that new standard. Some people are going to step up and say, yes, I hear you, I see you, I'm willing to do better. But some aren't. Some people are going to resist. Some people are going to make you feel like you're asking for too much. Some people are going to try to make you feel guilty for having standards. And that's when you'll know. That's when you'll see who was actually invested in you versus who was just comfortable with what you were willing to tolerate. And I'm not going to lie to you. That's going to hurt. Losing people always hurts, even when you know it's necessary. But I really believe the pain of staying in relationships that don't honor you is worse than the pain of letting them go. The pain of shrinking yourself is worse than the pain of standing alone. The pain of betraying yourself to keep someone else comfortable is worse than the pain of disappointing them. And tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn, you're going to feel that truth in your bones. You're going to know it's time. And if you're brave enough to act on that knowing, if you're willing to honor what you know even when it's hard, I believe you're going to look back on this moment as the day everything changed. The timeline nobody's prepared for, and why the next 72 hours matter more than you think. Now I need to talk about timing, because I think this is where a lot of people are going to miss the opportunity. This Venus-Saturn conjunction happens tomorrow, March 8th at 12:47 in the afternoon. But the energy doesn't just show up for an hour and then disappear. This is a portal that opens tomorrow and stays open for about 72 hours. Maybe a little longer. Here's what I mean by that. When two planets meet at an exact degree, they're considered conjunct. But their influence, their combined energy, it radiates outward from that moment. So tomorrow is the peak. Tomorrow is when the energy is most concentrated, most intense, most undeniable. But the days immediately before and after are also charged with that same frequency, just at a slightly lower volume. What this means practically is that if you're waiting for some magical moment tomorrow at 12:47 where everything suddenly clicks, you might miss it. Because the breakthrough might come tonight. It might come Monday morning. It might come in a conversation you have on Tuesday. The exact timing is less important than your readiness to receive it. But here's what I've been noticing, and this is really important. The people who are going to experience the most powerful breakthroughs from this conjunction are the ones who've been actively working with the energy for the past few weeks. They're the ones who've been setting boundaries. They're the ones who've been doing the inner work. They're the ones who've been showing up consistently even when they didn't see results. Because Saturn doesn't reward passivity. Saturn doesn't reward people who sit around waiting for the universe to deliver blessings. Saturn rewards effort. Saturn rewards discipline. Saturn rewards the people who prove through their actions that they're serious about what they want. So if you've been coasting, if you've been hoping things would just magically improve without you having to do anything different, tomorrow might feel like nothing. You might not notice any shift at all. And that's not because the energy isn't there. It's because you haven't positioned yourself to receive it. But if you have been doing the work, if you have been showing up, if you have been maintaining your standards, even when it was hard, even when you wanted to give up, I really believe the next 72 hours are going to bring you confirmation, validation, tangible evidence that what you've been building is real and it's working, and it's about to pay off in ways you might not have expected. And here's something else I want you to pay attention to. The days immediately following this conjunction are going to reveal a lot about where you actually stand. Because Venus moves fast. She's going to separate from Saturn and keep moving through Aries. And as she does, you're going to see very quickly whether the foundation you've built can support forward momentum or whether there are still cracks that need to be addressed. I think what's going to happen for a lot of people is they're going to have this moment of clarity tomorrow or Monday. They're going to see something they couldn't see before. They're going to understand something that's been confusing them. They're going to receive information or an opportunity or a conversation that shifts everything. And then they're going to have a choice. They can act on that clarity immediately, or they can hesitate. They can second guess themselves. They can talk themselves out of it. And I'm telling you right now, the people who act quickly are going to be the ones who capitalize on this energy. The people who hesitate are going to watch the window close. Not because the universe is punishing them, but because Saturn's energy doesn't wait around. Saturn says, here's your opportunity. Here's your moment. Take it or don't. But don't expect me to keep offering it if you're not willing to move. The hidden gift in the restriction. Now I want to talk about something that might sound counterintuitive, but I think it's one of the most important things to understand about this conjunction. Saturn is often unseen as the bad guy in astrology. The planet of limitation and restriction and delay. The planet that says no when you want to hear yes. The planet that makes everything harder than it needs to be. But here's what I've come to understand about Saturn, and this completely changed my relationship with this energy. Saturn's restrictions are actually gifts. Saturn's limitations are actually protection. Saturn's delays are actually divine timing, making sure you're ready for what you're asking for. Think about it this way. If you got everything you wanted the moment you wanted it, without having to work for it, without having to prove you were ready for it, what would happen? You'd probably squander it. You'd probably take it for granted. You'd probably lose it as quickly as you got it, because you wouldn't have developed the capacity to hold it. That's what Saturn prevents. Saturn makes sure that by the time you receive what you've been asking for, you've become the kind of person who can actually handle it. You've developed the discipline. You've built the foundation. You've proven through your actions that you're not just playing around. You're serious. And when Venus meets Saturn tomorrow, what's happening is this. Venus is saying, here's what I want. Here's what I desire. Here's what I think I deserve. And Saturn is saying, okay. I've been watching you. I've been testing you. I've seen how you respond when things don't go your way. I've seen whether you maintain your standards or lower them when it gets hard. I've seen whether you keep showing up or give up when you don't see immediate results. And based on what I've seen, here's what you're actually ready for. Here's what you've earned. Here's what you can handle. And for some people, that's going to be more than they expected. For some people, Saturn is going to say, you've done the work. You've proven yourself. Here's the blessing you've been waiting for. Here's the relationship. Here's the opportunity. Here's the financial breakthrough. You're ready. But for other people, Saturn is going to say, not yet. You're close, but there's still work to do. There's still a pattern you need to break. There's still a lesson you need to learn. There's still a level of maturity you need to reach. And I know that's hard to hear. I know it's frustrating. But I really believe it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of Saturn knowing that if you received what you're asking for right now, before you're ready, it would actually hurt you more than help you. And here's the beautiful part. Even if Saturn says not yet, even if the breakthrough doesn't come tomorrow in the way you hoped it would, the fact that you've been doing the work means you're closer than you've ever been. The fact that you've been maintaining your standards means you're building the foundation. The fact that you haven't given up means you're proving to Saturn that you're serious. And that matters. That counts. That's going to pay off even if it doesn't pay off on your timeline. The question you need to ask yourself right now. So as we move toward tomorrow, as we move toward this conjunction, I want to leave you with a question. And I really want you to sit with this. I want you to journal about it. I want you to get honest with yourself about it. Because I think your answer to this question is going to determine what you experience in the next 72 hours. Here's the question. What have you been asking the universe for that you're not actually ready to receive? What have you been praying for, manifesting for, visualizing for that, if it showed up tomorrow, would actually overwhelm you because you haven't built the capacity to hold it? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe you've been asking for your soulmate. But if you're honest with yourself, you haven't done the work to become the kind of partner that person would want. You haven't healed the patterns that destroyed your last relationship. You haven't developed the communication skills or the emotional maturity or the self-awareness that a healthy partnership requires. Or maybe it's money. Maybe you've been asking for financial abundance. But if you're honest with yourself, you don't have the discipline to manage it. You don't have the systems in place to sustain it. You don't have the relationship with money that would allow you to receive it without immediately sabotaging it. Or maybe it's recognition. Maybe you've been asking for your work to be seen, for your art to be appreciated, for your business to take off. But if you're honest with yourself, you haven't put in the hours. You haven't developed the skill. You haven't built the body of work that would justify that level of visibility. And I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying this because I think one of the most powerful things you can do right now is get honest about the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Because once you see that gap clearly, once you stop pretending it doesn't exist, you can actually do something about it. You can start building the bridge. You can start developing the capacity. You can start doing the work that will make you ready. And that's what Saturn wants. Saturn doesn't want you to give up on your dreams. Saturn wants you to earn them. Saturn wants you to become the kind of person who's worthy of what you're asking for. Not because you're not inherently worthy as a human being, but because you've developed the skills and the discipline and the maturity to actually handle it. So tomorrow when Venus meets Saturn at 0 Aries, I want you to pay attention to what comes up for you. Pay attention to the opportunities that present themselves. Pay attention to the conversations that happen. Pay attention to the realizations that hit you. But also pay attention to the resistance. Pay attention to the fear. Pay attention to the voice that says you're not ready, or you don't deserve it, or it's too good to be true. Because that voice, that's the part of you that Saturn is trying to mature. That's the part of you that needs to grow up. That's the part of you that needs to step into a new level of self-possession and self-authority. And the only way to do that is to face it. To acknowledge it. To work with it instead of against it. Why this matters more than any other transit this year. I want to be really clear about something. This Venus-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aries is not just another transit. This is not just another astrological event that comes and goes. This is a foundational moment. This is a cornerstone. This is the beginning of something that's going to unfold over the next 3 years as Saturn moves through Aries. Saturn is going to be in Aries until February 2029. That's 3 years. 3 years of Saturn teaching us about courage and initiative and self-assertion and independence. 3 years of Saturn asking us to become our own authority. 3 years of Saturn demanding that we stop waiting for permission and start claiming what's ours. And tomorrow is day 1 of that journey. Tomorrow is the initiation. Tomorrow is when Venus, the planet of what we value and what we desire, meets Saturn, the planet of structure and discipline, at the very beginning of that 3-year cycle. And what happens tomorrow is going to set the tone for everything that comes after. If you show up tomorrow, if you do the work, if you honor the clarity that comes through, if you act on the opportunities that present themselves, you're going to build momentum that carries you through the entire Saturn and Aries cycle. You're going to establish patterns and habits and standards that serve you for years. You're going to become the kind of person who doesn't just dream about what they want but actually goes out and gets it. But if you let fear win, if you talk yourself out of it, if you decide it's too hard or too scary or too risky, you're going to spend the next 3 years watching other people step into the opportunities you were too afraid to claim. You're going to spend the next 3 years wondering what would have happened if you'd just been brave enough to try. And I don't want that for you. I really don't. Because I believe you're here reading this right now for a reason. I believe you're feeling this pull towards something bigger for a reason. I believe the universe has been preparing you for this moment for a reason. And tomorrow is when you get to prove whether you've been paying attention. So here's what I want you to do. Tonight, before you go to bed, I want you to write down 3 things. First, write down what you're asking for. What do you actually want? Not what you think you should want. Not what other people want for you. What do you want? Be specific. Be honest. Don't hold back. Second, write down what you're willing to do to get it. What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to work for? Because Saturn doesn't respond to wishes. Saturn responds to commitment. Saturn responds to people who are willing to do whatever it takes. And third, write down what you're afraid of. What's the fear that's been holding you back? What's the story you've been telling yourself about why you can't have what you want? What's the belief that's been keeping you small? Write it down. Look at it. And then ask yourself, is this actually true, or is this just a story I've been telling myself to avoid taking responsibility for my life? Because I think that's what this conjunction is really about. It's about taking responsibility. It's about stepping into your power. It's about becoming the author of your own story instead of the victim of circumstances. It's about recognizing that you have more control than you think you do.